So this is a pretty neat question here. So we have an equation for a circle, and considering they want us to simply plug in -3 for x and find the y coordinate, we could do it by hand, which we'll look at in just a moment, but using Desmos ends up being pretty neat here. So let's go ahead and open that up in the upper right corner, get it to be kind of comfortable for you to type in. For me, I'm using my touchscreen. You can press Control plus or Control minus to zoom in or zoom out respectively. And then I'm just going to type this in. You could, of course, use the keyboard in the lower left corner. I like to use my own. And the biggest thing here is being able to type the exponent by pressing Shift 6 and then going to the right and then typing in the rest, and right equals 9. Okay, now it is beneficial to understand some of the key characteristics of a circle. So let's reference our program number 9, which is circles. So I'm gonna scroll down and just press enter here, press enter again, and we can see that the center is HK, in other words, the opposite of each of these. And then notice on the right side of the equal sign, it's the radius squared. So to get the radius, you take the square root of that number that's on the right side of the equal sign. So in our case, we have clearly a center of -3, +4 when you do opposite, opposite. And the radius, when you take the square root, is 3. And that makes sense. You can see at -3, 4, you have the center, and then you're going 3 units in every direction. Now, that's not what they're actually asking for, but I think it's useful to understand it. They want you to plug in -3 for x. So watch what happens when I do so. I'm just going to replace the x with -3. And then it produces 2 horizontal lines. This one is the horizontal line y equals 1, because the y coordinate is 1 everywhere along here. This one produces the horizontal line y equals 7, because y is 7 everywhere there. In other words, y could either be 1 or 7. So either of those would be the correct answer. That's why they say, what's a possible corresponding y coordinate? So you could put either of those answers and you'd be good to go. So 1 or 7. But for those of you who are curious, how could you have done this by hand, even though that option was pretty cool using Desmos? If I by hand plug in -3 for x, you could probably notice pretty quickly that this gives you 0, and 0 squared is still 0. So all you're left with is really this side of the equation. So you have y minus 4, the quantity squared equals 9. Now, whenever I physically take the square root of something squared, it's really important that right away I say I can either get plus or minus, in this case 3, when I take the square root of 9. Here, the square and square root cancel and I get y minus 4. And now I can add the 4 over. And then when I do so, I can get 4 plus or minus 3. 4 plus 3 is 7. 4 minus 3 is 1. And I could input either of those two answers and it would be correct. So either 1 or 7.